Tonight we're starting with something a little dangerous. Dangerous not because it will keep you awake, but because it might make you whisper "no way" to yourself in the dark. It's the story of the exact moment medieval life changed forever, not when kings rose, not when plagues arrived, but when one spectacularly unimaginative lord decided to start charging money for something that had been free since the dawn of bread, fire, and human cooperation. It's the kind of historical moment that makes you sit back, settle in, and watch your faith in humanity gently crumble like a badly baked medieval loaf. And that's exactly where you and I are traveling tonight. But before we step into that village, before the smoke, the soot, the quiet grumbling peasants, take a moment to get comfortable. Dim your lights, maybe light a small candle if you enjoy the glow. Let your phone rest nearby. Let your shoulders drop a little. Maybe turn on a fan or a gentle bit of white noise. This is your time to unwind, your time to drift, your time to travel quietly into a world where people had nothing, expected nothing, and somehow still got charged for everything. And hey, if you're new here, welcome. If you've wandered into this little corner of calm history before, welcome back. I always love imagining where people listen from. A city apartment with traffic humming outside, a quiet farmhouse where the night is thick and still, maybe a dorm where someone nearby is microwaving something highly questionable. Wherever you are, feel free to say hello in the comments and tell me what time it is where you're listening. It's oddly comforting seeing listeners from all over the world drifting into sleep together. And just a gentle nudge, only if you genuinely enjoy these slow nighttime journeys, feel free to subscribe. No pressure, no medieval taxes on joy, just support if you want more nights like this. But that's enough of the present. Let's slip backward, because now, in your mind, you open your eyes inside a small medieval cottage. The room is cool, the air faintly smoky from the fire that struggled all night to stay alive. You lie on a straw mattress that rustles like a complaining goose every time you shift. Outside, dawn has barely touched the horizon, and the sky is the color of wet parchment. Your day is beginning long before you feel ready for it. You sit up, wrapped in a wool blanket that smells like sheep and determination. The cottage around you is simple. It always is. Timber walls, a dirt floor, a single wooden stool, a table that wobbles gently like it had a long night, and against the far wall, the hearth, the heart of your home. The one place that warms you, cooks for you, dries your clothes, and occasionally threatens to burn the entire village down, because medieval houses were essentially tinder boxes with doors. You rub your eyes and breathe in the quiet morning air. It's colder than you'd like. It always is. But there's something comforting in the way mornings sound here. A distant rooster calling out into the grey, the soft snort of a neighbour's pig, the crunch of frost beneath someone's hurried footsteps as they head toward the fields. Your daily rhythm is slow, predictable, and at least for now, free. You stand, stretch, and reach for the small ball of dough you shaped last night. It isn't much, just flour, water, and the faint hope it rises enough to not resemble edible masonry. But it's your bread, your effort, your simple comfort. You tuck it into a small cloth and step outside, pulling your cloak around your shoulders. The cold greets you instantly, climbing inside your sleeves with icy enthusiasm. The village is waking too. Smoke curls from a few chimneys. You hear muted chatter, the shuffling of feet, the clatter of a wooden bucket against a well. Everyone is headed to the same place, the communal oven, the one spot in the village where families gather to bake their bread together. The oven has been there longer than anyone remembers. It's older than the Lord, older than his father, older than the tax records he suspiciously updates every time he feels bored or greedy. You walk along the worn path toward it, feeling that familiar sense of comfort. The oven is more than a baking place. It's where news is shared, where jokes are whispered, where people complain about goats and weather and the confusing decisions of nobility. It's one of the last things in your world that still feels shared, fair, unclaimed, human. You reach the village square, and there it stands, a big stone dome, soot blackened and warm from last night's fire. A few villagers are already there, holding their dough and chatting sleepily. You nod to them, feeling that quiet sense of morning community. But something feels different today. A tension hangs in the air, like the moment before a dropped pot hits the floor. You notice the villagers aren't smiling the way they usually do. They're whispering, not gossiping, but worried murmuring. You follow their gaze, and that's when you see him. The Lord, standing in front of the oven. Your stomach sinks a little, though you're not sure why yet. Lords don't usually visit the village unless something is wrong enough to affect him anyway. He's staring at the oven with the curious intensity of someone inspecting a suspiciously happy object. His cloak is far too clean for morning work. His boots shine with the kind of polish that says he has never walked anywhere without complaining. You get closer, and you hear his voice. Clipped, self-important, confident in the way only someone who has never been questioned can sound. This, he says, tapping the oven with a gloved finger, belongs to me now. The villagers freeze. You freeze. The oven, your shared oven, has never belonged to anyone. It simply existed, like the sky or the river or the hope that winter will be mild. But now the Lord continues, his voice swelling with the joy of someone inventing a new way to ruin everyone's day. If you wish to bake your bread, he says, you will pay. And just like that, your morning simplicity cracks. A free thing has become a taxed thing. And you feel in that cold dawn air that this is only the beginning. Tonight's journey has only just started. You stand there, dough in hand, while the Lord's announcement spreads through the morning air like smoke no one asked for. The villagers around you shift uneasily. Some look down at the ground. Others stare at the oven, as if trying to understand how something so ordinary, so familiar, could suddenly be claimed by a man who has never lifted anything heavier than a feather quill. You tighten your grip on your cloth-wrapped dough. It suddenly feels heavier. The oven, usually surrounded by warmth and chatter, now radiates a different kind of heat, something tense, sharp, and unfamiliar. For a moment, no one dares to speak. Even the fire inside the dome seems to crackle more quietly, unsure of its role in this new world the Lord has declared. Finally, old Marta steps forward. She's the kind of elder who has seen enough winters to be unimpressed by most things, wolves, storms, and even the occasional outbreak of questionable medieval health trends. But this seems to unsettle even her. My lord, she says carefully, voice steady but soft, this oven has always been for the village. The Lord turns his head toward her with the slow, deliberate movement of someone who believes his gaze alone is a form of law. And now, he replies, it is for the village at a fair price. A few villagers exchange looks. A fair price. Those words ring with the same sincerity as a fox promising it will guard your chickens. The Lord gestures to his steward, a thin man with the expression of someone who permanently smells something unpleasant. The steward unrolls a tiny parchment and begins reading the new fee structure in a voice as dry as stale rye. 1 loaf, 1 silver piece, 2 loaves, 2 silver pieces. Burning the oven accidentally, 3 silver pieces. Burning it intentionally, 5. Complaints, variable. The villagers murmur horrified. 1 silver piece is no small amount. For some families, that's a week of earnings. You feel an uncomfortable twist in your chest. The oven wasn't just a convenience, it was a necessity. Baking bread at home is nearly impossible. Medieval houses have a charming habit of catching fire at the slightest encouragement, which is why the communal oven existed in the first place, one giant fire that everyone used, instead of 50 small fires burning the entire village down. You're not the only one thinking it. Jeren, a young farmer with perpetual hay stuck in his hair, speaks up. Why charge us at all? He asks. The oven costs nothing to keep. We gather wood, we stoke the fire, we clean it. The Lord raises an eyebrow, amused. If it costs nothing, he says, then surely you won't mind paying something. You feel the shift in the villagers, the shared frustration coiling tighter. But no one dares argue further. Open rebellion is the fastest way to a punishment fee. None of you can afford. The Lord seems satisfied with the silence he's created. He turns to his guards. Ensure payment is collected. No baking without record. And with that he leaves, cloak fluttering like he thinks it's dramatic and not merely drafty. The moment he's gone, the square erupts into whispers, some angry, some resigned, some already calculating how to stretch what little money they have. You swallow, feeling the weight of the moment settle into your bones. Something is breaking here, something that held the village together in quiet, simple unity. You step closer to the oven, hoping its familiar warmth might calm your thoughts. But even that feels different. One of the guards blocks your path slightly. Payment, he says. You blink. Now, he shrugs. Pay or wait. Your dough suddenly feels like a burden you're carrying through someone else's world. You pull out a small pouch and hand over a single silver piece, the coin cold, heavy, reluctant to leave your palm. The guard pockets it without a second glance. No receipt, no record, just a disappearing coin and a smirk. You give him a forced nod, step past him, and place your dough among the others inside the oven. Normally, the baking process is accompanied by chatter, people joking, teasing, sharing the tiniest gossip about whose goat wandered where. But this morning, everyone stands further apart. The laughter is absent. Even the fire crackles with caution instead of cheer. You lean against the stone wall, watching the flames dance. The heat warms your cheeks, but your stomach remains cold. Beside you, Marta lets out a long sigh. It begins, she murmurs. What does? You ask quietly. She glances at the guards, making sure they're out of earshot. The taking. Once a lord charges for one thing, he charges for another. The river, the mill, the wood, the very air if he could grasp it. You frown. He wouldn't charge for air. Marta gives you a look that suggests she has lived through enough that nothing, absolutely nothing, surprises her anymore. Give him a month, she mutters. You watch the guard pacing near the oven, his boots hitting the ground with the confidence of someone who thinks enforcing petty rules makes him powerful. A few villagers hover nearby, counting coins, frowning, weighing their options. Some families won't bake today. Some may not bake all week. You suddenly feel how fragile life is here, held together by routines so simple and small that losing even one of them creates a crack big enough to swallow the whole village. When your bread is finished, you retrieve it carefully, the crust warm under your fingers. But even as the heat seeps into your palms, the joy of fresh bread feels dimmed. You turn to head home, and as you walk past the edge of the square, you overhear two guards talking quietly. Did you hear? One says. No, replies the other, sounding bored. Hear what? The Lord's planning something else, something bigger, he wants to claim. But just then the wind shifts, their voices fade, and you only catch one word clearly. The river. You stop walking. A cold shiver crawls up your spine. Because if he can take the oven, what's stopping him from taking the water too? And as you step out of the square, bread under your arm, you realize something unsettling. This morning wasn't the end of anything, it was only the beginning. When you leave the village square behind, the sun has finally pushed through the morning clouds, casting a soft pale light across the fields. Your loaf of bread feels warm beneath your arm, but your thoughts linger on something far colder. Those words the guards whispered, the river. You try to shake it off. Maybe they were joking. Guards aren't known for their humor, but perhaps today one of them tried. Even so, the idea burrows into your mind like a splinter. The river has always been free. Always. It is the village's lifeline. Drinking water, washing water. The place where children chase frogs and grown men pretend not to. Charging for bread was outrageous. Yes, but charging for water would be catastrophic. The village path slopes downward, leading you through a cluster of cottages until the trees thin and you finally hear it. The familiar rush of the river. It's a comforting sound, steady and ancient. You've heard it your whole life. You've never once imagined it could be interrupted, controlled, or owned. You kneel at the bank and set your bread down, cupping your hands to splash your face. The water is icy, clear and refreshing. For a moment you close your eyes, letting the chill wash away the morning's tension. When you open them again, you notice something odd on the far side of the riverbank. A group of men you don't recognize are hammering wooden posts into the dirt. They're building something. A narrow structure is forming. Planks, beams, a half-finished walkway that juts awkwardly over the water. A bridge, but not just any bridge. A bridge with a gate. A very small, very silly, but unmistakably intentional gate. Your stomach twists. You stand slowly, brushing droplets from your face. Across the river, one of the workers notices you staring. He gives you a stiff nod, the kind of nod someone gives when they're not legally allowed to talk about what they're doing. You return the nod, trying to look casual. A bridge with a gate. It couldn't be what it looked like. Not this soon. Not today. You crouch again, filling your water jug, trying to calm your thoughts. But as you turn to leave, a voice calls out behind you. You there? You spin around. A rider approaches along the bank. A nobleman's messenger by the look of his tidy clothing and his expression, which suggests he finds everything beneath him, including the horse he's sitting on. He reins in sharply, sending up a spray of mud. You're to gather in the square this evening, he says. A proclamation from the Lord. Your veins run cold. A proclamation. You ask, though you already know it's never good news, when a lord decides to proclaim anything. The messenger rolls his eyes as if bored by your existence. Yes, attendance is required. He turns the horse away and gallops off before you can ask anything else. You stand there for a moment, listening to the river rush by your feet. It used to sound peaceful. Now it feels like a countdown. What could he possibly want now? On the walk back, the village feels different, tense. A few people stand outside their homes, murmuring about the workers near the water. Children who would normally splash in puddles instead stay close to their parents, sensing something in the air. Even the dogs seem unusually quiet, ears perked toward the riverbank, as though they understand the threat. By midday, rumors swirl like smoke. Some say the Lord wants to charge for crossing the water. Others claim he plans to tax the fish. Someone swears he overheard a guard complaining about a hydration fee, which sounds so absurd you want to laugh, except after this morning. Nothing seems absurd enough to dismiss. When evening comes, you return to the square along with everyone else. The communal oven glows behind you, its warmth doing nothing for the cold pit in your stomach. The villagers gather in a loose semicircle, exchanging nervous glances. You spot old Marta near the front. She looks grim, arms crossed tightly. When she sees you, she gives a small knowing nod. Told you, she murmurs. One thing leads to another. Before you can reply, the Lord steps onto the raised platform, flanked by guards. He surveys the crowd with that unsettling satisfaction of a man who believes the world belongs to him simply because he woke up with a title. Good people of my lands, he begins, smiling in a way no one finds comforting. Today marks an important improvement for our village. Improvement. You mentally brace for impact. As you know, I have generously taken responsibility for the communal oven, ensuring its safety and proper use. Several villagers visibly tense. The Lord continues, oblivious. And now, he says, voice swelling with the thrill of inventing a new inconvenience. I extend this responsibility to the river that flows through my domain. A ripple moves through the crowd. You feel it physically, like a cold wind. The river, he says, is a valuable resource. For too long, it has been unregulated, unsafe, undisciplined. You grind your teeth. The river has been both safe and disciplined for longer than his ancestors have been forgetting basic logic. To protect this resource, and ensure fair usage, I am implementing a modest toll for all crossings. The crowd erupts, gasps, complaints, whispered curses. Someone shouts, but the river is free. The Lord raises a finger. Free things, he says, are often the most misused. Beside you, Jerin mutters, then we should start taxing him. The Lord gestures toward the half-built bridge. Construction will be completed by morning. All villagers must cross using the official structure. Wading through the water is prohibited. For safety reasons. Safety, you repeat quietly, staring at the shallow stretch of river where children splash every summer. The water barely reaches your knees. Marta leans toward you. It's not about the bridge, she whispers. It's about the coin. The Lord continues, outlining prices that make your stomach churn. Crossing alone costs money. Crossing with goods costs more. Crossing with livestock, even worse. And if your cow so much as glances at the river, there's a fee for that too. Around you, villagers exchange looks of disbelief, anger, hopeless laughter, the kind people use when the only other option is crying. Then the Lord adds something else. Furthermore, additional measures will be announced tomorrow concerning water collection. Your breath catches. Water collection. That means drinking water, bathing water, rainwater. He nods to the guards, who begin dispersing the crowd. That is all. Prepare yourselves accordingly. People scatter, mumbling anxiously. You remain frozen in place. Water collection. Those words echo in your mind, like a storm rolling toward the village. Marta touches your arm. Be ready, she warns. You swallow, throat tightening. For what? She looks toward the river, where torches flicker near the construction site. Workers hammer through the night, building the gate that will change everything by sunrise. For the moment, she says softly, when he finally decides the sky belongs to him too. And as darkness settles over the village, you feel it in your gut. Tonight's announcement wasn't even the worst of it. Tomorrow will be far worse. The morning after the Lord's proclamation arrives far too quickly. You barely sleep, drifting in and out of uneasy dreaming, your mind full of rivers with gates, guards counting coins, and the unsettling idea of water becoming private property. When dawn finally seeps through the cracks in your shutters, you rise to a world that somehow feels different, not because anything visible has changed, but because something invisible has started tightening its grip around the village. You prepare your grain as you always do. It's one of the few routines left that still feels untouched by the Lord's improvements. The small handmill in your cottage sits quietly in the corner, 2 round stones worn down by years of your family grinding its grain. You run your fingers over the surface. It's smooth, familiar, and honest, everything the Lord's new rules are not. You pour the grain into the top stone, turn the handle, and feel the slow resistance as kernels crack and shift into coarse meal. The rhythm is comforting, grounding you in a world that keeps trying to shake itself loose. You imagine your parents doing the same, and their parents before them, turning grain into survival with nothing but muscle and patience. It's one of the last pieces of control you have over your life. So naturally, it's the next thing the Lord will take. Halfway through grinding, a strange sound interrupts your thoughts, a distant clatter of hooves, not many, but enough to prick at your nerves. You pause. Horses rarely come into the narrow lanes between cottages unless something is wrong. You step to the doorway and peek outside. 3 mounted men ride through the village, each wearing the Lord's colors and expressions carved from stone. They aren't patrols. You know patrols. These men look like they're hunting something specific, moving with purpose from doorway to doorway. One stops to bang on a cottage door, another dismounts and pushes his way into a shed. A third consults a parchment, pointing toward different homes as if following a list. You slip back inside just as one rider's gaze sweeps in your direction. A chill crawls up your spine. You don't know what they're searching for, but nothing good ever arrives on horseback this early in the morning. You return to your mill, turning it as quietly as possible. The grain shifts, crunches softly, and you hope the sound is drowned out by the hoofbeats outside. But soon the rider's movements grow closer. You hear a neighbor arguing in a hushed voice, something about tradition, followed by a stern reply about new regulations. You stop grinding entirely. Your door bursts open without warning. A tall man with a hooked nose and a measuring stick strapped to his belt steps inside as if the cottage belongs to him. 2 guards flank the doorway, waiting silently. The man's eyes sweep the room and land on your mill with cold satisfaction, the way a cat looks at a mouse that has conveniently stopped running. Unauthorized milling, he announces. You blink, unsure you heard correctly. Unauthorized, what? The use of private handmills, he says. Banned by order of the Lord, all grain must now be processed at the Lord's mill. Effective immediately. You stare at him, stunned, but I've always ground my own grain. He shrugs, already bored, and now you won't. His tone makes it clear that logic, tradition and survival are none of his concerns. One of the guards steps inside, placing a hand on the millstone, as if it might try to escape. What happens if I don't take my grain to the Lord's mill? You ask quietly. The man taps the parchment against his palm. Fines for the first offense, confiscation for the second, destruction for the third. Repeat offenders may face imprisonment for grain theft. Grain theft, you repeat bitterly. It's my own grain. Not once it is milled, he replies. The guard lifts your handmill with the reverence of someone removing contraband treasures. It's absurd. 2 stones lifted like dangerous weapons, but you feel powerless to stop them. The inspector rests a hand on the stones, nodding in approval, and then looks to you. You may petition for the return of these stones in the future, he says, though the tone makes it clear no such petition will ever succeed. But until then, all grain must be taken to the Lord's mill on the North Hill. Fees will be posted there. The guards carry your mill outside, leaving the cottage feeling strangely empty. You step into the doorway just in time to see other villagers emerging from their homes, each one looking equally violated. Handmills are being confiscated across the village, loaded onto carts like spoils from a battlefield no one meant to fight. Marta stands near her fence, her millstones already gone, her face is tight with anger. "I told you," she mutters when she sees you. Once they find a new way to earn coin, they never stop. You join her, watching the procession of confiscated mills. "What is he planning?" "The same thing he always plans," she replies. "To make everything we do depend on him." The Lord's mill sits on a small rise north of the village, an old building with a water wheel that hasn't turned properly since last winter. It was rarely used before because the handmills worked just fine, and because the miller, an impatient man with the hygiene of a damp sheep, always took more grain than he was owed. Now, with every family forced to use his services, the mill becomes a bottleneck, a trap, a place where standing in line is no longer a choice but a necessity. By midday, you join the others trudging toward the mill, sacks of grain slung over shoulders. The line stretches down the hill, people shifting their weight, muttering under their breath, staring at the building with dread. The water wheel creaks sluggishly, its tired groan echoing across the valley, like the mill itself resents the sudden workload. Inside, the miller stands behind a counter, puffed up with an authority he never deserved. A new wooden chest sits beside him for collecting fees. Every time a coin drops into it, he beams with smug satisfaction. You watch as one villager tries to argue the price, only to be met with a rehearsed explanation about maintenance costs, grain inspection fees, and the Lord's new standard. And then you notice something else. Men in the Lord's colors standing at the back of the room, silently watching. Not workers, not guards, inspectors, making sure no one dares challenge the new system. Your turn in line comes. The miller reaches for your sack with greedy fingers, and for the first time today, you feel something strange, uncertainty, yes, but also a faint growing anger. Because this isn't the river, this isn't the oven, this is something personal, something that reaches into your home, your hands, your identity. And just as you're about to hand over your grain, a shout erupts outside, a loud, panicked shout, followed by another. Then screaming. The kind of screaming that means something far worse than taxes has arrived. You turn toward the door, just as a young boy bursts inside, breathless and terrified. "The river," he gasps, "it's gone." And before anyone can respond, he adds 3 words that freeze the entire mill into silence. The water stopped. For a few heartbeats, the mill stands silent. Not the peaceful kind of silence that comes after hard work, but the heavy, suffocating stillness that follows terrible news. The boy stands at the doorway, chest heaving, face pale, eyes wide with the kind of fear that doesn't come from imagination. People around you exchange startled glances, and even the miller, who normally wears the smug expression of a man who believes he is indispensable, goes rigid with confusion. Slowly, villagers step toward the door, the grinding wheel forgotten, the fees forgotten, everything forgotten, except the impossible idea that the river could simply stop. You follow them outside, moving with the current of bodies as if pulled by an invisible force. The path to the river feels longer than usual, every step filled with dread. The murmur of voices grows louder as the entire village gathers near the bank, staring at something none of them have seen before. You push through the crowd until you reach the front, and your breath catches. The river hasn't vanished, not entirely, but its once lively current is now reduced to a sluggish trickle seeping between exposed stones. Pools of water sit trapped between muddy patches, reflecting the sky like broken mirrors. Fish are stranded in shallow puddles, flopping helplessly. A smell of wet earth rises, unfamiliar and unsettling. Children cling to their parents. Some people drop to their knees, touching the mud in disbelief. This river has flowed for longer than any records, longer than any memory. Seeing it stilled feels like seeing the world itself falter. You scan the opposite bank, and immediately spot the cause. The construction you saw the day before has grown dramatically. The half-built bridge now stretches nearly all the way across the water, and beside it, a crude wooden barrier blocks most of the remaining flow. Workers shout orders, dragging timbers into place, tightening ropes, hammering beams. The Lord stands among them, mounted on his prized horse, as if conducting a ceremony. When he notices the gathering crowd, he raises a hand with the self-satisfied calm of a man presenting a triumph that no one else asked for. Guards fan out behind him, forming a neat line along the river. You can feel the tension ripple through your village. The Lord clears his throat dramatically and addresses the crowd as though nothing unusual has occurred. "Good people," he says, "do not be alarmed. This is a temporary measure to regulate water usage." Temporary measure. You glance at the barricade again. Nothing about it looks temporary. It is thick, reinforced, and far more obstructive than the small toll bridge they promised. The villagers begin shouting questions. Why block the river? Why without warning? Why at all? He smiles patiently, the way a man smiles when he knows he doesn't have to answer to anyone. In the past, he says, the river has been freely used by all, but with growing demand and concerns over misuse, it is my duty to ensure responsible distribution. You feel the blood rush to your face. Misuse? What misuse? This river only ever carried what it was meant to: water, mud, and the occasional runaway chicken. He continues speaking, almost proudly. This barrier will allow us to monitor usage. Those who need access to the flow may register at the toll bridge. Fees will be set according to volume and purpose. Gasps rise from the crowd. Fees for the water that nourishes crops, hydrates families, cools livestock, quenches thirst, washes wounds. Someone shouts that the river belongs to the land, not the Lord. Someone else demands to know how crops are meant to survive now. A guard silences the crowd by stepping forward with his spear raised. The Lord speaks over the tension. All households will be allowed a fair portion of water per day. Anyone found taking more than their allotted amount will be fined. A woman near the front collapses to her knees, clutching her baby. The child's lips are dry, cracked. She whispers something about rationing, about how her husband needs water for their animals. But the Lord is already turning his horse away, finished with the conversation before anyone else has even caught up. As he rides off, guards begin patrols along the riverbank. They shout at villagers who approach too closely. Barrels, buckets, even cupped hands are inspected. Two men who kneel to collect a little water for their animals are immediately questioned and escorted away. You watch this with a sick feeling. The river didn't dry up naturally. It was strangled, controlled, transformed from a blessing into a bargaining chip. And if the Lord feels powerful after claiming water, then nothing is safe. By midday, the village is exhausted. People return home slowly, speaking in hushed, hopeless voices. Without water, everything becomes harder. Washing vegetables, boiling food, cleaning clothes, cooling tempers, it all depends on access that no longer exists. You return home too, your legs heavy. Inside your cottage, the air is stale and warm. You go to the hearth to stir the embers for kindling, but the woodpile beside it has shrunk alarmingly. You burned more than usual last night, trying to ease the cold born from fear rather than winter. You need to gather more firewood before nightfall. You grab your cloak and head toward the edge of the forest, a familiar path you've walked since childhood. For generations, villagers have gathered fallen branches freely. It was never considered theft. It was survival. But today, as you approach the tree line, something feels wrong. You hear rustling, heavy rustling, and low voices. Then you see them. The Lord's guards are patrolling among the trees. They move slowly, watching the ground, watching the villagers creeping along the forest's edge. One guard suddenly lunges forward, grabbing an old man by the arm and yanking a large stick from his hand. "Illegal collection," the guard declares. The old man stammers, "It fell from a tree." "It's not cut wood." "Doesn't matter," the guard replies. "All wood now belongs to the Lord." Your heart drops. First bread, then the river, then the mills, now firewood. You scan the forest again and notice wooden signs hammered into trees. Royal timber. No collection without permission. A woman tries to reason with a guard, explaining she needs wood for her sick child's warmth. The guard simply shrugs and tells her to buy a permit. People stand frozen at the forest edge, torn between fear and necessity. You look down at your empty basket, then at the guards. You know you need wood, and the forest is right there, full of fallen branches waiting to be gathered. But stepping forward now means risking fines, confiscation, or worse. The forest, once a place of calm and quiet, is no longer safe. You take a step back, then another, clutching your cloak tighter around you. Something inside the forest cracks sharply, followed by a shout from the guards. Someone has run, someone desperate enough to risk everything for warmth. And then you hear the guards yelling after the fleeing figure as they vanish deeper into the trees. Get them. They took more than a stick. You watch the chase disappear into the shadows, and a realization settles deep in your bones. If the Lord controls the fire, he controls the nights. But as you turn to leave, another villager races toward you, breathless and pale. There's news, he says. Something worse than the water or the wood. You steady yourself. What now? He looks over his shoulder, as if the very air might be listening. They've started blocking the roads, and before you can even ask why, he adds, voice trembling, there's a gate across the main path, and no one gets through without paying. The world shrinks around you, tightening like a noose. Tomorrow, even walking may no longer be free. You stand there for a moment, staring at the villager who has just delivered the news, and the forest suddenly feels colder around you, not because of the temperature, but because you can feel the world shrinking. First the oven, then the river, then the mills, and now the very paths beneath your feet. It is as if the Lord has looked at the map of the village and decided that any line drawn by nature or necessity should now pass through his coin purse. You hurry back toward the village square, the air thick with dread. On the way, you pass neighbors whispering frantically to one another, some clutching baskets of goods, others herding nervous animals. Everyone seems to be moving with purpose, but not direction, like ants who've discovered their hill collapsing. When you reach the main road, you understand why. The gate is unmistakable. A wooden barricade has been erected across the road, tall enough to block carts, strong enough to stop a determined man, and ugly enough to announce its presence long before you reach it. 2 guards stand at either side, like carved statues, spears grounded, expressions blank and unwelcoming. Behind the gate sits a small table, where a scribe writes slowly with a long feather quill, dipping it into ink between every name he records. The sound of scratching parchment echoes through the still air, as though it is slicing away the last bits of freedom the village once had. A line has already formed, a farmer leading a cow, an elderly woman carrying a basket of apples, a traveling merchant who looks like he regrets ever entering the region, and a young couple holding each other's hands tightly, as if passing through the gate might tear them apart. One by one, they step forward, speak to the scribe, pay their toll, and are waved through by the guards. The cow hesitates, but the guard taps its flank sharply, and even the animal seems to understand that hesitation now carries a price. You step closer to hear what is happening. The scribe asks each villager their name, purpose of travel, estimated duration of absence, and contents of their cart or basket. The guard then declares a toll based on the answers, though the tolls seem strangely inconsistent. The farmer with the cow pays 3 coins. The elderly woman with apples pays 1. The merchant pays 5. You hear someone in line muttering that yesterday he crossed the same road without paying anything, and the guard answers simply, yesterday isn't today, which sounds less like a statement and more like a threat wrapped in a proverb. You approach a woman you know, Sarah, a weaver, who stands near the back of the line, clutching her cloak as though someone might take it from her. Her face is pale, lips tight with worry. What's happening? You ask. She shakes her head, barely able to speak. We're trapped, she whispers. This road is the only easy way to the next town. My sister lives there. I visit her every week. But now, she gestures helplessly at the gate. Now I can't, not without paying coin I don't have. You ask if there are other paths. She gives a hollow laugh. Yes, the forest trails, the marsh route, the old goat track through the hills, but the guards already chased off people trying to take those. They caught Tomas before he even reached the tree line, and fined him for avoidance of official infrastructure. You blink. Avoidance of the road, she nods grimly. The guard said if a road exists, using it is mandatory because the Lord invested in its improvement. But the road is just dirt. You look down. It is indeed just dirt, with a few rocks kicked aside by peasants' feet. Improvement seems like a generous word, or a delusional one. The line moves slowly. Each toll seems more arbitrary than the last, as if the guards are selecting prices based on mood, hunger, or boredom. You wonder how long it will take before even standing near the gate becomes a chargeable offense. The guards certainly look like they'd enjoy that. The air around the gate feels wrong, like the villagers are no longer travelers but merchandise being processed. A man ahead of you tries to argue about the price, insisting that he only needs to walk a short distance to gather herbs for a sick relative. The guard responds by doubling the fee. When the man desperately offers a single coin, everything he has, the guard shakes his head, unimpressed. The man's shoulders slump as he steps out of line, unable to pay. As you watch him walk away defeated, you realize the real danger is not the toll itself, it's what the toll represents. Roads mean movement. Movement means opportunity, trade, connection, safety. If a lord controls the roads, he controls who can leave, who can return, who can trade, who can survive. A man who decides when you bake, drink, grind grain, collect wood, or walk is not just a lord. He is a cage. You back away slowly, wanting no part of this new spectacle. You decide to take a different path home, not toward your cottage but toward the edge of the fields, wanting space to think. The sky above you is a soft, uneven grey, and crows perch on fence posts, watching the unfolding absurdity like they're taking notes for some cosmic comedy. The wheat rustles in the breeze, though even it seems less alive today. Eventually, you stop near the old well at the edge of the farmland. It's quiet here, away from the shouts and clatter. You lean against the mossy stone rim and close your eyes, trying to breathe. And then you hear the footsteps, not hurried, not panicked, slow, deliberate, almost hesitant. You open your eyes and see a guard approaching, not one of the gate guards, but another, someone you vaguely recognize from occasional patrols. His expression is different from the others, not cold but troubled. He stops a few steps away and glances over his shoulder before speaking. "You need to know something," he says. Voice low, your pulse quickens. "What?" He hesitates, swallowing hard, as if the words themselves are dangerous. The Lord isn't finished. The gate, the tolls, they're nothing. He has a new decree ready, one he plans to announce tomorrow. Every muscle in your body tenses. What decree? The guard steps closer, lowering his voice even more. He wants to charge for rainwater. Your breath freezes. "No," you whisper. He nods grimly. "Buckets, barrels, roofs, anything that collects it." He says the clouds drift over his land, so their water belongs to him. You stare at him, unable to speak. Then he adds one more sentence, quiet, heavy, and devastating. "And he's sending patrols out tonight, to start watching the rooftops." Your heart thuds painfully in your chest, because if he controls the rain, then tomorrow the sky itself becomes a prison. You walk home with the guard's warning echoing in your mind, each word heavy enough to bend the air around you. Charging for rainwater. The idea is so absurd it borders on madness. And yet every absurdity the Lord has conceived so far has somehow become reality. Bread, water, movement, wood, each piece of your life taken quietly at first, then boldly as though your existence has always been part of his estate. But rainwater? The sky itself? That crosses into something else entirely. It's no longer about money or control. It's about rewriting the rules of nature, forcing a village to bend under a weight no human should be able to impose. By the time you reach your cottage, the sky has shifted from flat grey to the mottled, restless look of an approaching storm. Clouds churn above the rooftops, darkening into shades that promise a cold, heavy rainfall. Normally the village might welcome it, a chance to refill jugs and barrels, rinse linens, ease parched gardens, and let children splash in puddles. But now the air is thick with unease. Mothers hurry inside with their children, dragging buckets away from doorsteps. Men mutter to one another about empty cisterns, but are too afraid to place anything under the eaves. People glance upward nervously, waiting not for the rain, but for the patrols, and the patrols do not keep them waiting long. As the first drops fall, soft as whispered warnings, the clatter of boots echoes through the village lanes. 3 guards push through the main path, cloaks pulled tight against the wind, eyes scanning rooftops and windows. They aren't looking for criminals, they're looking for containers, barrels, bowls, anything that might dare catch the falling sky. One guard carries a long pole, using it to tap shutters open, peek under overhangs, and prod anything that looks remotely like a water collector. A second guard walks with a parchment, marking down the names of households that appear suspiciously prepared for weather. The third one simply watches the villagers with the intensity of a wolf tracking prey. You stand by your doorway, trying to look casual, though your heartbeat is louder than the thunder rumbling over the hills. One guard pauses near your home. His eyes linger on your gutter, a simple wooden channel carved decades ago by your father, guiding rain off the roof so it wouldn't rot the beams. It's not designed to collect water, it simply exists, but now, under this new rule, it looks like evidence. The guard's fingers twitch toward his pole, as if he wants to test it, to make sure you aren't hiding a bucket beneath the runoff. He studies your face for a long, uncomfortable moment, then he walks away, leaving you with the unsettling knowledge that even your roof is no longer your own. The rain intensifies, turning the village into a patchwork of rippling puddles and glistening shingles, yet no one dares step outside to enjoy it. People peer from windows with the haunted look of prisoners, watching water they desperately need splash harmlessly onto the dirt. A child begins to cry somewhere down the street, begging his mother to let him play in the rain, but she hushes him sharply and drags him away from the window. Another guard's voice booms over the sound of rainfall, commanding people to stay indoors unless they plan to cross the toll gate. Apparently walking in the rain now implies possible water collection. You feel trapped in your own home, listening to the storm you cannot use, the sky that has been claimed, the world shrinking even further. But as the rain falls, something else nags at you. A thought from earlier, that boy who said the river had stopped, the way the water thinned to a trickle, the wooden barrier. The strange urgency from the Lord, the new bridge, the tolls, the rationing. Nothing about the river's sudden stillness feels natural, and now with the rain falling so heavily, you expect the river to swell again. Yet you have a sinking feeling it won't. Something inside you knows you need to see it, not tomorrow, not after the guards finish their patrol, but now while the storm churns and hides your footsteps. As quietly as possible, you pull on your cloak and slip out the back of your cottage, avoiding the main lane where the guards roam. You move between houses, ducking behind sheds and timber stacks, using the noise of rainfall to mask your movements. The path to the river has grown muddy, but the rain also hides footprints. Each drop strikes the ground with a hiss, like the earth is whispering warnings you're too determined to hear. When you reach the riverbank, the sight hits you like a blow. The water has not risen, not even a little. While rain pounds the rooftop of your village and pours down the hillsides, it barely trickles through the narrow gaps left between the wooden beams of the Lord's barrier. The barricade is thicker than before, reinforced overnight, sealed with pitch, tightened with ropes, and guarded by two men sitting beneath makeshift shelters. The river behind the barrier looks swollen, straining against the obstruction, but on your side, it remains thin and weak, as if the lifeblood of your village has been captured and held hostage. Then you notice movement on the far bank. Workers exhausted, soaked to the bone, illuminated by the flicker of torches, are digging channels behind the barrier. Not channels that direct water toward the toll bridge. No, these channels curve upward, bending away from the village entirely. They snake toward the Lord's lands, toward his manor, toward something hidden beyond the tree line. You step closer, squinting through the rain. The workers shovel frantically, carving the earth, reinforcing the banks, building a controlled aqueduct system. A private river. A river diverted intentionally not away from the village, but towards something else. Something he once powered, filled or supplied. You feel your stomach twist. You know what this means. The water rationing isn't about fairness, the tolls aren't about safety. Blocking the river wasn't a temporary measure. He's moving the water, hoarding it, controlling it. And for what? Farming, brewing. A private bath large enough to embarrass a small ocean. You have no answers, only the dread that whatever he's diverting the river for will hurt the village even more. But then, just as you're about to step back into the shadows, a loud crack splits the air. One of the wooden beams shifts violently. Two workers fall backward, shouting. Water surges through a new gap, roaring like an angry beast finally slipping its leash. The guards jump to their feet, shouting for reinforcements. The rain pounds harder, feeding the river's strength. The swollen water behind the barrier rises fast. much faster than the workers can react. And you realize with a sudden icy shock that if the barrier breaks, the force of the water will tear through the village. As you watch the wooden structure groan and splinter under the pressure, a single thought crystallizes in your mind: if this collapses, the village isn't just losing its river, it's about to drown. The cracking sound echoes across the river like a tree splitting in the heart of a storm. But the workers and guards react too slowly, as though their minds cannot fathom the idea that something built by the Lord could fail. You, standing hidden beneath the dripping branches, see it before they do, the beam bulging outward, the ropes snapping one by one, the pitch-sealed seams straining like the last threads of a fraying cloth. Behind the barrier, the trapped water swells higher, churning with the full weight of the storm. It's as if the river itself has grown furious at being held back and has decided to reclaim its freedom in one violent surge. Another crack splits the air, louder than before, and one worker finally screams for everyone to move. But it is too late. With a deafening roar, the main beam snaps, and the river explodes forward. A wall of water surges through the opening, throwing the workers off their feet and sweeping torches into the raging current. The guards scramble backward, slipping in the mud as the roaring torrent slams into the unfinished bridge supports, knocking them sideways. The bridge gate collapses like a child's toy, swallowed instantly by the flood. You stumble back instinctively, heart pounding as muddy water sprays across the bank. Yet the river does not immediately rush toward the village the way you feared. The broken barrier causes chaos, but the water, instead of pouring directly down the main channel, splits in two directions. Part of it rushes forward, but a strangely large amount diverts sharply to the side, following the newly carved trench the workers had been shaping. Even broken, the Lord's diversion system works, steering a significant portion of the flood away from the village entirely. The diverted water rushes into the hidden aqueduct, roaring into the forest toward the Lord's estate. You stand in confusion. The village is spared from drowning not because of luck, but because the Lord had built his water theft so aggressively and thoroughly that half the river now flows straight toward his private lands, even without a functioning barrier. The workers gather themselves, shouting orders and cursing the storm, but the damage is done. The river is no longer a river, it is two rivers, one weak and dying, one redirected and unnaturally strong. For a moment, you wonder whether anyone else in the village has seen what you've just witnessed. They will see the broken bridge, the damaged barrier, the rushing water, but they will not see the deeper truth. The Lord hasn't just taxed the village's water, he has been slowly stealing the river itself. You watch the workers attempting to recover torches and tools from the mud, while the guards bark at them to hurry. One man yells that they need reinforcements, another says the Lord will punish them for letting the barrier fail. They all look terrified not of the water, but of the man who thinks he owns it. You turn and slip away before they notice you. Rain continues to fall in sheets as you make your way back toward the village, but your mind isn't on the weather. It's on the makeshift channel, leading into the forest, the furious water rushing down a newly carved path. The way the river seemed desperate to flee the village. You walk quickly, almost stumbling in the mud, replaying the realization over and over. The Lord is draining the river into his lands. Whatever he's planning, it requires a massive supply of water, more than he could ever justify as regulation. But what could he possibly need that much water for? Irrigation? A private mill? A moat? Brewing? You dismiss each idea as unlikely. This is too large, too intentional, too costly. Something far bigger is happening. By the time you reach your cottage, the storm has quieted into a steady drizzle, and the patrols have thinned. Most guards are either dealing with the damage at the river, or sheltering from the rain they claim jurisdiction over. You slip inside and shut the door behind you, listening to the muffled drips from the roof. The interior feels colder and darker than it ever has. You light a small oil lamp and sink onto the stool, trying to piece everything together, but each thought leads to another question. Why take control of bread, then water, then movement, then fuel? Why rebuild the mill monopoly? Why tax rainfall? Why divert the river? There is a pattern here, but not one you fully understand yet. As you sit there, lost in thought, a knock sounds at your door, quiet but urgent. You stiffen, but when you open it, old Marta stands outside, rain dripping from her shawl. She pushes her way in without waiting for an invitation, shutting the door behind her. Her face is pale, pinched with worry, and the moment she sees your expression, she realizes you've seen something. You were near the river, she says, not asking but stating. I saw you leaving the fields. You nod. Marta removes her shawl and sits heavily at your table. Tell me everything. And so you do. You describe the barrier breaking, the diverted water, the secret channels carved behind it. Marta listens without interrupting, her fingertips tapping softly against the wood. When you finish, she exhales through her nose, the way she does when something confirms her worst fears. He's preparing for something, she murmurs. Something that needs power, movement, machinery. Water is a force. He wouldn't steal it unless he was planning to use it. You ask her what she thinks the Lord is building, but she only shakes her head, unwilling to say what she suspects out loud. Before you can press her further, another knock shatters the room's tense quiet. This one louder, sharper, official. You both freeze. Marta's eyes widen, and she slips into the shadowed corner as you move toward the door, trying to keep your breathing steady. You open it just an inch, enough to see a guard standing outside, rain dripping from his helmet, expression stern. All villagers are to gather at the square, he announces, immediately. Your stomach clenches. Why? He glances toward the sky, where the storm has begun to fade, leaving behind a heavy stillness. A new decree, he says. The Lord will speak. He says this one concerns food. You feel your blood run cold. Not bread, not milling. Food. Before you can respond, the guard steps back and repeats the command to the next cottage. Marta emerges from the shadows, face pale. Food, she whispers. There's only one thing left he can take. You swallow hard, feeling dread climb your spine. You already know she's right, and as you step outside, following others toward the square, you pray you're wrong, but you fear you know exactly which ancient freedom is about to be claimed next. Because if the Lord is now turning his attention to food, then the village's hunger is about to become a weapon. And as you approach the square, torches blazing, villagers gathering, and the Lord stepping onto the platform, you realize one terrible, unshakable truth. This new decree might finally push the village past fear and into something far more dangerous. Revolt. The square is already crowded by the time you arrive. Villagers press together beneath the fading storm clouds. The air hangs heavy with damp earth and anxious breath, and though the rain has slowed to a mist, it feels as though the sky itself is holding back, watching. Torches flicker around the platform, sizzling softly from the recent downpour, and guards ring the area with an alertness that suggests they're prepared for trouble. You can sense it in the way they grip their spears a little tighter, in the way their eyes scan every face. Something in the village has shifted, and not even the soldiers can ignore it. Old Marta stands beside you, her jaw clenched so tightly that the lines around her mouth deepen like carved stone. When the Lord steps onto the platform, the crowd falls into a forced silence, one that feels less like respect and more like the final breath before a storm breaks. The Lord raises his hands in a rehearsed gesture of authority. He looks oddly invigorated, as though the chaos from the broken barrier has only fueled his arrogance. His cloak, freshly dried, billows behind him, as he surveys the villagers with a smile that does not reach his eyes. My good people, he begins. You have endured much change these past days, change that is necessary for order, safety, and the well-being of this land. A murmur ripples through the crowd, half disbelief, half disgust, but the Lord continues as if he cannot hear it. And now, he says, we must address the final matter of unregulated resources, the exchange, growth, and distribution of food. The murmur turns into a wave of whispers. You feel your stomach tighten. Food is the last thing the villagers truly control. Their gardens, their livestock, their small patches of land. Many families would not survive without their own vegetables and grains. The Lord raises a parchment, unrolling it dramatically. Until now, food production has been chaotic, he declares. Some grow more than they need, while others grow too little. Some sell at markets without oversight. Some barter privately. There is no uniformity, no structure, and this lack of regulation invites unfairness. A farmer near the front shouts, unfairness. The only unfairness is you meddling in things that work just fine. A few villagers nod, but a guard immediately steps forward. and the farmer falls silent before a punishment can be issued. The Lord's voice sharpens. As of this moment, all food grown within my lands must be registered, inspected, and measured. Anyone wishing to plant, harvest, or sell produce must acquire a license. Livestock owners must report births, trades, and slaughters. All harvests must be recorded, and a small portion, reasonable and fair, must be contributed to the Lord's stores to ensure stability for all. A reasonable and fair portion, means whatever amount he wants. The villagers know it too. Panic spreads through the square. A woman clutches her basket as though it suddenly contains contraband. A shepherd whispers frantically to his son. Someone cries out that their fields are already planted. Does this mean they must uproot everything to comply? The Lord speaks over them. Additionally, private food storage must be limited. Small households may keep a modest supply. Excess stores must be surrendered for redistribution as needed. The Lord's personal granaries will swell while villagers starve. You feel the rage rising in the crowd like heat. This is too much. This touches everyone, every field, every kitchen, every mouth. The oppressive weight of the decree settles on the villagers like an avalanche. For the first time, some guards look uneasy, shifting their weight, aware that they are vastly outnumbered. The Lord, however, looks delighted by the discomfort. We will begin inspections tomorrow, he adds. All households must cooperate fully. Inspectors will ensure fairness is upheld. Anyone withholding crops or livestock will face serious penalties. He rolls up the parchment and prepares to leave, but before he can step off the platform, a voice rings out from somewhere in the crowd. You're starving us. The words cut through the air like a thrown stone. The Lord stops abruptly. He turns, searching for the speaker, but the crowd has shifted and closed in. Whether out of fear or solidarity, no one points to the source. Instead, several villagers shout variations of the same accusation. We can't survive this. You're taking everything. We won't stand for it. The guards move frantically now, forming a tighter line around the platform. But the villagers' anger is no longer a whisper. It is a living thing, rising and spreading, filling the square with a feeling you've only ever sensed during funerals and storms. Something ancient, emotional, collective. Marta grabs your arm, her eyes wide and wild. This is it, she whispers. This is where it breaks. She's right. The tension is ready to erupt. Villagers step forward, fists clenched, brows low, faces carved with fury and fear. Even livestock react to the energy, cows shifting nervously and chickens fluttering in their crates. A guard shouts for the crowd to disperse, but no one moves. The Lord raises his voice, attempting to sound commanding, but there is a tremor beneath the surface, the first hint of doubt cracking through his confidence. Return to your homes, he demands. This is the law, but the villagers do not listen. You feel yourself being pulled subtly forward, the momentum of the crowd achieving a will of its own. Someone near the front throws a handful of mud at the platform. It splatters across the Lord's cloak. Gasps ripple through the square. The Lord's face darkens with rage. He signals to his guards, who step forward with weapons drawn. For a moment, the world holds its breath. The rain has stopped entirely now, leaving only the thick silence before something irreversible happens. Then, out of nowhere, another villager shouts, not in anger, but in warning. Look! Everyone turns. A single rider is approaching the village at full gallop, mud flying from the horse's hooves. The rider waves a crimson banner, one you've never seen before, and shouts something you cannot understand until he is nearly at the square. He reins in with a violent pull, chest heaving, and yells loud enough to shake the torches. The Lord's diversion, his water channels, they've burst. The forest is flooding. The crowd gasps. Marta's grip on your arm tightens painfully. Something in the rider's eyes tells you this isn't a small disaster. Not a broken barrier. Not a creek overflowing. This is something else. Something enormous. And then the rider speaks the words that freeze every villager where they stand. The water is heading straight for us. For a moment, the entire square seems to tilt, as though the earth itself is reacting to the rider's words. The panic that had been simmering beneath the surface during the food decree erupts into a frenzy of noise and motion. Villagers shout in disbelief. Mothers clutch their children. and men exchange frantic looks as if trying to decide whether to run toward safety or toward the danger to see it for themselves. The Lord, still standing on the platform, goes pale, not out of concern for the village, but from the dawning realization that his grand design has unraveled in a way he did not intend. Guards rush to his side, forming a protective wall around him, but even they look shaken. Floods are unpredictable, unstoppable, and impossible to command with parchment or coin. The rider, mud-splattered and breathless, tries to catch his breath long enough to explain. The diversion channels, everything he built, couldn't hold the water. With the storm, the river behind the barrier swelled too fast. The trenches overflowed, burst their banks, tore straight through the forest road. Whole trees are coming down with it. His voice cracks, panic overtaking his composure. You have minutes before it hits the lower village. Screams erupt across the square. People scatter in every direction, abandoning baskets, tools, even market stalls. Some run for their homes to grab valuables. Others pull family members by the hand toward the higher ground at the far end of the village. Chickens scatter underfoot, dogs bark madly, and the air hums with a kind of electric terror you've never felt before. Old Marta grips your arm with surprising strength for someone her age. "Move," she hisses. "Do not freeze now. This is what comes of tampering with rivers." You follow her into the frenzied surge of fleeing villagers, but even as you move, your eyes flick toward the forest. In the distance you can already hear it, the low, monstrous rumble of something vast and heavy tearing through the earth. It is a sound you instinctively recognize, though you've never heard it before, the sound of a flood, water moving with the unstoppable force of a runaway beast, devouring everything in its path. You and Marta run toward your cottage, fighting against the tide of people rushing the opposite way. You need to grab essentials, anything you can carry. But as you approach your home, a chilling thought strikes you. The Lord's manor sits on elevated land. His diversion channels were built to feed something on his side of the forest, meaning the water may reach the village before it ever touches him. The Lord will remain safe while the people below drown. The realization ignites a spark of anger inside you, even amidst the panic. You burst into your cottage and grab your essentials: a cloak, some bread from earlier, a few tools, the jug with whatever water hasn't been rationed away. Marta grabs spare cloaks and a small wooden box she refuses to explain. The rumble outside grows louder. You glance toward the doorframe. The ground itself seems to vibrate. "We need to go," you say. "Now." She nods, and you both rush back outside. Villagers form long lines moving uphill toward the ridge path. It's the only chance they have. But you quickly notice something alarming. The road near the toll gate is blocked, not by debris, but by guards. They stand shoulder to shoulder across the uphill road, blocking the very path that leads to safety. By order of the Lord, one shouts over the rising wind, "No one may pass without paying the emergency toll." His voice cracks slightly, betraying nerves, but he does not step aside. Even in the face of an oncoming flood, the Lord demands coin. Fury rips through the crowd. Someone throws a stone. Someone else screams that they refuse to die behind a wooden gate. A farmer charges forward with a shovel, but a guard pushes him back violently. The villagers surge in anger, shouting, crying, demanding the right to live. But the guards press the line, insisting that order must be maintained, even if it kills everyone standing behind them. Marta tugs on your sleeve. "Come," she urges. "We are not cattle to be herded by fools." She pulls you toward the back of the crowd, weaving between houses toward an older trail, one that most villagers stopped using generations ago because it's narrow, steep, and riddled with roots. Thunder cracks in the distance, though you cannot tell if it comes from the sky or the water now tearing through the forest. You and Marta squeeze between two abandoned storage sheds, climbing over a fence and ducking beneath low branches. Once you emerge onto the forgotten path, you find a handful of others who had the same idea, families with wide eyes and trembling hands clutching children and sacks of belongings. You all exchange a silent agreement: this is the only route left. But before you take even 10 steps up the slope, a sudden gust of wind roars across the fields, followed by the unmistakable sound of trees snapping. The flood is close, too close. You risk one glance back. The forest line shivers, sways, and then the water bursts through it like a charging bull. A wall of muddy, foaming water rolls forward, carrying branches, uprooted bushes, and pieces of the ruined waterworks. It looks alive. You turn and run as fast as your legs will move. The path slick with rain, the incline steep enough to burn your muscles instantly. Marta runs beside you, breathing hard but refusing to slow. The group ahead forms a chain, helping one another climb the slick path. A child slips on a patch of wet moss, but someone catches him before he falls. Behind you, the roar intensifies. You don't look back again. You can feel it rising, feel the vibration of thousands of gallons crashing across the land you walked on only hours ago. Someone shouts for people to move faster. Someone else cries out that their grandmother can't keep up. You grab the arm of a man struggling to climb, pulling him forward, your lungs burning, and your heart hammering painfully. Just when you think you might outrun the flood, Marta stumbles. Her foot catches on a twisted root, and she falls hard, her cloak tangling beneath her. You skid to a stop, doubling back to help her. She tries to stand, but her leg buckles beneath her. "Leave me," she gasps. "You must go." "Not a chance," you snap, grabbing her arm. The water's roar is deafening now. You can hear it smashing into the lower cottages. You can hear the screams of villagers caught in the central lane. You haul Marta upright, forcing her weight onto your shoulder. Together you start up the path again. Every step a battle against gravity. Then above the roar of the flood, another sound slices through the chaos. Horns. Deep, unfamiliar horns. They echo from the forest's far edge. Not the village, not the Lord's men. Something else, something approaching from the direction of the diverted river. Marta stiffens. "Those aren't his horns," she whispers. The water slams into the lower ridge. The horns sound again, closer this time. And that's when you realize the flood isn't the only thing coming. Something or someone is arriving with it. The horns echo again. Long, low, and resonant, rolling across the drenched forest with a depth that belongs to neither your village nor the Lord's men. The villagers around you freeze mid-climb, their terror momentarily eclipsed by confusion. Even the roar of the flood seems to shrink beneath the eerie weight of that sound. It feels ancient, hollow, and wrong, in a way you cannot name. The last time you heard horns was during the Lord's tax announcements, but these aren't thin, metallic village horns. They sound carved from something older, wood, bone, or something you don't want to imagine. Marta clings to you, trembling harder now than when the flood first burst through the trees. "Keep moving," she whispers, her voice dry with fear. "We don't want to be on this path, if those who blew those horns reach it." You struggle upward, supporting her weight, as the path narrows into a slippery ledge. Behind you, the flood devours the bottom of the trail, swallowing bushes and barrels and anything careless enough to be left behind. The water foams and snarls as it climbs the slope, but thankfully, the incline is steep enough to slow it. Still, each second counts. The horns sound again, closer, clearer, and accompanied now by the rhythmic thump of hooves against sodden earth. But these hooves don't gallop like horses. They thud heavily and unevenly, as though whatever carries them does not care about the uneven ground or the fallen branches beneath its steps. You help Marta around a sharp bend in the trail, and spot a cluster of villagers ahead, who have reached a wider ledge. They gesture frantically for you to hurry. The flood is creeping upward, but something else, something moving along the water's edge, steals everyone's attention. Through the tangle of rain-heavy leaves, you glimpse movement, dark shapes weaving between trees, emerging briefly into the open, before melting back into the shadows. They move in single-file formation, steady and unhurried, following the diverted water like trackers moving along a fresh trail. You can't see faces, only silhouettes and the faint glint of wet leather or metal. Whoever they are, they don't resemble farmers or soldiers. Their posture is too rigid, their steps too synchronized, and they carry torches wrapped in oiled cloth to keep them burning even in the damp aftermath of the storm. The flames flicker in a strange greenish hue that makes your skin crawl. The villagers on the ledge whisper panicked theories. Marauders, bandits, mercenaries hired by the Lord. outsiders from the mountain passes. But none of those explanations feel right. Marauders do not move with such calm discipline. Mercenaries do not follow a raging flood into unfamiliar woods. And no bandit group you've ever heard of uses horns or torches that glow like sickly moss. You force yourself not to stare too long. Whatever these figures are, the forest itself seems uneasy around them. Birds silent, branches still, even the wind holding its breath. The flood's roar becomes background noise compared to the dread building in your chest. You finally reach the ledge, muscles burning from the effort of supporting Marta. A few villagers help pull you up. From here, you can see most of the lower valley. The floodwater churns through the village center, lifting carts and fences, and even entire sections of road. A handful of cottages already lean at unstable angles, their foundations loosened by the force of the water. The toll gate, ironically, stands intact, its wooden beams braced into the hillside. But the guards who manned it are nowhere to be seen. The square is half submerged. The bakery roof peaks above the brown water like a stranded island. And yet, amidst the devastation, the Lord's Manor remains pristine atop its hill, untouched, dry, and glowing with torchlight. Even from here, you can spot soldiers gathering outside its gates, preparing for something you cannot see. The contrast hits you like a blow. The village drowns while the Lord watches from a safe perch, his own diversion channels likely rerouting the flood far from his precious estate. As you stare, Marta clutches your wrist, her eyes locked on something else, something to the far left of the village, near the tree line, where the diverted water originally entered the forest. Through the storm's aftermath haze, you finally see what she sees, the Lord's secret project. You hadn't noticed it earlier in the chaos, but now, partially exposed by the flood tearing away the earth, you can make out wooden supports, stone foundations, and the beginnings of a large mechanical wheel, far bigger than any mill wheel the village has ever used. It lies embedded in the ground, covered in mud and debris, but unmistakably designed to harness incredible water power. The Lord wasn't diverting the river for irrigation or luxury. He was feeding this massive construction, a machine capable of grinding, lifting, or forging on a scale that could shift the balance of power in the region. No wonder he needed so much water. No wonder he starved the village of it. He was building something only the river itself could sustain. The villagers around you gasp as they spot the structure, each of them coming to the same dreadful conclusion. A war machine, someone whispers. A forge engine, another guesses. Marta leans close, lowering her voice to a shaky whisper. This is why he took everything. Every freedom. Every resource. He was preparing for something much larger, and now the flood has exposed it before he was ready. Before you can respond, another horn blasts through the forest, so close this time, that the ledge vibrates beneath your feet. The villagers flinch, some crouching instinctively. The figures in the woods emerge more clearly now, stepping near enough to the flood's edge that you can see their outlines. They wear long cloaks with hoods pulled low, their torsos protected by mismatched pieces of old armor that look scavenged rather than forged. Green flame reflects off their metal plates. They move like hunters, not hurried, not afraid, but driven by some grim purpose. And then you notice something else. They aren't following the river by coincidence. They are tracking the path of the diverted water, specifically the path leading straight to the Lord's hidden construction. Whatever they aren't here for the village. They are here for him. One of the cloaked figures lifts a horn to his lips and blows a final thunderous call that echoes up the hillside and into your bones. The forest falls silent. The group stops directly at the edge of the Lord's project, staring at the exposed wooden framework with an unmistakable sense of recognition. Marta grips your arm. They know what he's building, she whispers. They've come because of it. Before you can ask how she knows that, another shout rises from farther up the ridge, a shout of pure, unmistakable fear. You look uphill. A second group of strangers is already there, watching you, standing directly in your escape path. Their cloaks drip with rain, their masks carved with unfamiliar symbols, and their hands rest on weapons that look nothing like village tools. And for the first time tonight, you realize the flood isn't the threat anymore. You are surrounded. For a heartbeat, everything around you freezes. The The dripping leaves, the muddy, trembling earth beneath your boots, the cries of villagers trying to flee the lower valley. Even the flood's distant roar seems to dim beneath the shock of seeing the second group of strangers block the ridge path. They stand in a tight formation, their silhouettes sharp against the faint, cloud-muted light. Their cloaks cling to their bodies, soaked from the rain, but their posture is unwavering. Each mask they wear is carved with different symbols, curved lines, jagged marks, and intricate shapes that look like they belong to no culture you know. The masks are not painted. They seem stained as though the wood absorbed color from fire or something less natural. In their hands they hold long staffs topped with metal spikes, hooks, or small lanterns filled with that same greenish fire the torches below carry. The sight of them, silent, staring, absolutely still, sucks the warmth from your bones. The group behind you, the first one following the diverted river, continues advancing slowly, methodically. You sense they have no intention of harming the flood survivors. They simply don't care about you. Their eyes, if they have visible eyes beneath their hoods, are fixed on the Lord's exposed construction site, the giant water-driven machine that the flood revealed like a secret wound in the earth. But the group on the ridge, their intention is very different. They are watching the villagers, watching you, with a focus that feels colder than the rain ever did. A few villagers gasp or begin to pray under their breath. One man, clutching his daughter, attempts to move toward a different path, but two masked figures shift slightly, blocking even the attempt. It becomes clear that fleeing blindly will not work. The ridge path is no longer an escape route. It has become a trap. Old Marta clings to your sleeve, but this time her face isn't twisted by fear alone. There's recognition there. Not full recognition, but something like the ghost of memory, an old rumor resurfacing from a time before you were born. "These aren't bandits," she whispers, barely audible over the ragged breathing of the people around you. "They're something older, something I thought only lived in stories." You turn toward her, stunned, but she shakes her head. "Not now, later if we have a later." Her words hang between you, too heavy to ignore, too vague to understand. The ridge group steps forward as one, and the green fire lanterns cast an eerie, shimmering glow across the hillside. One figure, taller than the rest, raises a hand in a slow, deliberate gesture, not threatening, but commanding absolute attention. When he speaks, his voice is muffled behind the mask, but deep enough to reverberate in your chest. "You stand in the path of consequence," he declares. His words are accented strangely, the syllables curved in ways unfamiliar to your ear. "This land is corrupted by ambition. You have breathed its decay. You have lived beneath the shadow of a thief of the earth." A murmur spreads through the villagers. "Thief of the earth." You feel Marta stiffen, and you don't need to ask to know she believes the stranger is referring to the Lord. The masked figure gestures toward the forest below, where the diverted water continues raging through the trenches like a beast unleashed. "He has taken what is not his," the stranger continues. "He has altered the river's course, cracked the land, awakened forces bound long before your village was built." Another masked figure raises his lantern, letting the green light spill across the felled trees and the exposed foundation of the Lord's construction. You all bear the consequences now. Someone in the crowd musters enough courage to shout, "We didn't choose any of this. The Lord forced it on us." But the masked figure on the ridge doesn't respond with sympathy. His posture remains rigid, unreadable. "Consequences do not choose their victims," he replies. "They follow the wound." His words strike like cold iron. The villagers look at one another helplessly, caught between the rising water behind them and the silent, masked wall in front. Then something unexpected happens. From the far side of the square below, lights flare around the Lord's manor. The gates burst open, and a company of mounted soldiers rides out, torches held high, armor gleaming gold against the torchlight. They move with the rigid precision of an army expecting combat. The villagers gasp when they realize where the soldiers are heading, straight toward the ridge path and the masked figures guarding it. The Lord isn't going to help the villagers. He's coming to confront whoever threatens his secret project. The masked leader on the ridge tilts his head as he watches the approaching cavalry. "He comes," he murmurs, almost amused, "as we knew he would." The masked figures tighten their formation. lanterns raised, weapons angled diagonally across their bodies in a disciplined stance. You suddenly understand, they were never here for the flood. They were waiting for the Lord. The flood merely accelerated their plan. You turn to look at the villagers around you, people you've known your entire life, faces drenched, bodies shaking, eyes wide. You can feel their terror deepen, as they realize they're caught between two forces neither of them understands. The Lord's soldiers behind them, and these silent ritualistic strangers before them. And you feel something else too, a spark of anger boiling beneath your fear. These people, your people, have done nothing but try to survive. They baked their bread, fetched their water, gathered their wood, walked their roads, tended their fields, and every piece of their lives has been turned into someone else's profit. And now, once again, they might pay the price for a war that was never theirs. The ground trembles as the Lord's cavalry draws closer. You hear the clank of armor, the snort of horses, the clatter of hooves on wet stone. The masked figures shift slightly, but remain calm. You tighten your grip around Marta's waist to steady her. She leans close, breath warm against your ear despite the cold air. "Keep your eyes open," she whispers. "This is not just a battle, this is a reckoning." The lead rider breaks ahead of the others, torch blazing like a comet. The masked leader steps forward. For a moment, the two forces stand just yards apart, staring each other down through smoke, steam and rain. Then the Lord himself emerges behind his soldiers, mounted atop his pristine horse, wearing a breastplate too polished for someone who's never fought a real battle. His gaze locks onto the masked stranger, and the tension between them thickens the air. The Lord raises his sword. The masked leader raises his lantern, and just as the two forces prepare to collide, a sound erupts behind you, one that chills your blood far more than the flood or the horns. A scream, not of fear, but of pain. And it comes from a villager near the back of your group, someone you cannot see, but whose cry carries a single, unmistakable message. Something else has entered the ridge. Not soldiers, not strangers, something alive, and very, very close. The scream slices through the chaos like a jagged blade, and every head on the ridge snaps toward its source. For a moment, no one moves. Even the Lord's soldiers pause mid-charge, their horses stamping nervously on the slick ground. The masked figures on the ridge tense, turning slightly but never breaking formation, their lanterns casting an eerie green shimmer across the wall of terrified villagers. The scream comes again, shrill, choked, and desperate, followed by the unmistakable sound of something thrashing through underbrush. You instinctively tighten your grip on Marta as you pivot, trying to see through the curtain of branches and fog rolling off the drenched hills. It's too dark to see clearly, but you hear it, the wet slap of heavy limbs, the crunch of roots torn from the ground, and the low trembling growl of something that should not be anywhere near a village. A few villagers at the back try to scramble forward, pushing into those ahead of them, but there is nowhere to go. The ridge is narrow, slick, and crowded, and the masked figures still block the only path forward. The Lord's cavalry blocks the only way back. The creature in the dark continues its steady approach, the sound of its movements growing louder, angrier, more purposeful. One of the villagers closest to the noise raises a trembling lantern toward the trees. The flame flickers wildly, illuminating only branches dripping with rainwater, until something moves behind them, something tall, hunched and disturbingly large. A collective gasp ripples through the ridge. You catch only a fragment of the silhouette, but it's enough to confirm your worst fear. This is no wolf or wild boar. It stands too upright. Its limbs are too long. It moves with a deliberate weight that belongs to nothing herbivorous, nothing timid, nothing natural. Marta grips your arm fiercely. "It came down from the northern woods," she whispers. "The flood didn't just bring water. It disturbed things meant to stay buried." Before you can ask what she means, the creature lunges forward, and the lantern light catches enough of its body to steal the breath from your lungs. Its fur is matted with mud and river weed, its shoulders as broad as the trunk of an old oak. Its eyes, reflective, yellow, and unnervingly intelligent, glare from beneath a sloped brow. But the worst part is its mouth, which hangs open in a crooked snarl, revealing rows of teeth too large and too uneven to belong to any known animal. Villagers scream and scramble backward, but backward only means pushing into one another, into the ridge wall, or into the masked figures who refuse to budge. The masked leader raises his lantern calmly, its sickly green flame flickering like a living thing. "It is drawn to imbalance," he says, his voice low but somehow audible over the creature's guttural snarls. "The tearing of the river, the cracking of the land, the machine below, unfinished but awakened." His words send a shiver through you. Unfinished but awakened. What has the Lord truly built in the hidden clearing? The Lord's soldiers, ignoring the masked faction momentarily, turn to face the new threat. Torches blaze around them as they form a defensive line, their horses anxious but trained to steady under duress. The lead soldier calls out, "Stand down, hold the line," but his voice betrays an edge of panic. No training prepares a man for the sight of a creature that looks like it crawled from the marrow of an ancient nightmare. The creature charges. It bursts through the trees with terrifying speed, crashing onto the ridge path and sending mud spraying in all directions. Its roar reverberates through the mountainside, so loud you feel it in your ribs. The front line of villagers scatters, creating a chaotic whirl of bodies and shadows. A few slip in the mud, crying out as they fall. Others push past you, desperate to get away from the enormous shape now shaking the entire ridge with its movements. The creature swipes at the nearest figure, a young man holding a broken rake as if it could save him. The beast's claws slice through wood and air, but the man dodges just in time, falling backward and scrambling away with a cry. The masked figures remain unnervingly calm, shifting their stance just enough to avoid panicked villagers, but never breaking formation. Their stillness feels unnatural, as though they expected this creature, as though it is part of the reason they are here. The Lord's cavalry pivots, torches raised like blazing suns against the fog. "Drive it back," the Lord commands, his voice cracking with fear disguised as authority. The soldiers lower their spears and charge. Horses thunder forward, but the creature reacts with brutal precision. It swings its massive arm, striking the lead soldier's horse square in the chest, sending both mount and rider tumbling off the ridge path with a sickening scream lost to the flood below. The remaining horses rear in terror, throwing riders to the ground as the ridge devolves into total chaos. A soldier skids dangerously close to the edge of the cliff. You sprint toward him without thinking, grabbing his arm and pulling him away just before the mud beneath his boots gives out. He stares at you, shocked, but before he can speak, another roar shakes the ridge. The creature turns its attention toward the masked figures now, baring its teeth. The masked leader steps forward, raising the lantern higher. The green flame flares, as though reacting to the creature's presence, and the beast hesitates, just for a moment. But it is long enough for one masked figure to throw a hooked staff around its leg, yanking it off balance. Another drives a metal spike into the ground at an angle, anchoring the creature's foot. The beast roars and thrashes, ripping roots and soil apart in furious resistance. "It is bound to the river's old flow," the masked leader says, "and the river's flow has been stolen." The creature tries to break free, but its movements are sluggish, heavy, almost pained. You realize then that it's not just a beast. It is something tied to the land itself, something awakened by imbalance, something the river once kept hidden and quiet. The Lord sees the masked figures subduing the creature, and snarls, realizing his control of the scene is slipping. "Seize them," he shouts. All of them, his soldiers, frightened but obedient, struggle to reorganize and push toward the masked group. The villagers scream as the ridge becomes even more crowded, trapped between the creature, the soldiers, the masked faction and the drop into the flood below. The masked leader lowers his lantern, and turns his head slightly toward you, though you're not sure if he sees you specifically, or simply speaks to the ridge as a whole. "The river sought balance, and so did we, but the land is more wounded than we expected." Before you can process his words, the creature suddenly rips its leg free with a sickening crack, breaking the spike and throwing two masked figures off their feet. But instead of charging forward, the creature twists violently toward the lower slope, eyes blazing with primal fury, and then it bounds past you, downhill straight toward the shattered remains of the Lord's secret machine. You barely have time to scream a warning, because the creature isn't just attacking the machine, it's going to tear open whatever the Lord was hiding inside it. The creature thunders downhill with a speed that defies its massive frame, mud spraying in wide arcs as it leaps from rock to root with frightening precision. Each impact leaves deep gouges in the soaked earth, as if the ridge itself buckles beneath its weight. People scramble aside, flattening themselves against the cliff wall, or diving behind boulders. The masked figures try to reform their line, the green fire flickering violently in their lanterns, but the creature is beyond restraint now, driven not by hunger or instinct, but something deeper, a fury bound to the land itself. Marta grips your sleeve with both hands as the beast disappears over the lower slope. "We must follow," she says, breathless. "If it reaches the machine before we understand what he built." She doesn't finish the sentence. She doesn't need to. You and a handful of villagers begin descending the ridge, slipping down the treacherous path carved by centuries of rain and hoofprints. Behind you, the clash of steel on stone erupts as the Lord's soldiers collide with the masked figures. The battle crackles through the air, torches scattering sparks like fireflies as soldiers fight to regain control of the slope. But the confrontation fades behind you as you descend, because the far more terrifying sound comes from the forest below, the creature's roars mingling with the shattering of wood and the low groaning of stressed beams. The machine is being torn open. The closer you come, the more you see what the flood exposed. The structure is massive, far larger than you originally realized. The water wheel is only the visible surface. Beneath it, half buried by mud and broken earth, lies a chamber reinforced with thick beams and stone slabs, as though meant to withstand enormous pressure. Broken planks jut out at angles where the creature has ripped through the wooden siding. Water gushes through openings, pouring into the ruined trench that once fed the machine. Steam rises where water meets metal, and you catch the faint smell of heated iron, oil, and something chemical. This is not a mill. This is something engineered with frightening ambition. The creature slams its shoulder into the exposed chamber again, and this time the wood gives way completely, collapsing inward with a splintering crack. A gust of stale air bursts out from inside the chamber, air that smells wrong, heavy, metallic, and faintly acidic. The beast reels back, shaking its head and snarling, then swipes at the debris, clearing the opening further. You crouch behind a fallen tree trunk, heart pounding as you peer into the darkness the creature has revealed. Inside, faint glimmers of polished metal catch the moonlight. Gears, rods, levers, channels and wheels arranged in an intricate web of craftsmanship, unlike anything the village has ever seen. You've heard stories of peculiar devices used in faraway cities, water clocks, pressure bellows, strange contraptions powered by heat and steam, but this is something else entirely. This isn't a tool. It's not a simple weapon. It's a mechanism built for enormous force, designed to channel massive volumes of water through controlled routes. Whatever the Lord was building required power, speed and relentless motion. A villager beside you whispers, "It's a forge engine, but far too large for weapons alone." Another murmurs, "Look at the channels, those are no grain chutes." "Then what?" someone asks, voice trembling. Before anyone can guess, the creature reaches into the chamber with one powerful arm and pulls something loose, something heavy enough that the ground shakes when it drops. You glimpse it through the dust cloud, a block of metal, shaped deliberately, rather than naturally, with strange grooves carved into its surface. The grooves form a repeating pattern, one you don't recognize, but that Marta inhales sharply at the sight of. She whispers something under her breath, too soft for you to hear, but the fear in her voice is unmistakable. The creature roars again, and tears away another section of the chamber. This time, the collapsing wood reveals something even more horrifying. A stone-lined pit beneath the floor, filled with a dark swirling liquid. It sloshes as water from the flood pours into it, sending up fumes that sting your eyes. The smell is sharp and metallic, with an oily sheen that glints strangely even in the dim light. "That's not water," Marta says, clutching her cloak over her mouth. That's not anything meant to be near people." You watch in disbelief as the beast steps closer to the pit, sniffing the air cautiously. It growls, a lower, deeper growl than before, its posture shifting from rage to something like recognition, as if it senses a disturbance older than the village itself. Then, without warning, it plunges its arm into the pit, churning the liquid violently. Steam bursts upward in thick clouds, and the beast recoils, howling with pain as the strange substance coats its fur and skin. The ground quakes, the metal in the chamber rattles. The water wheel groans as if the entire structure teeters on the edge of collapse. You pull Marta back just as part of the support beams give out, sending debris and liquid spilling down the ruins. And then you hear shouting behind you, multiple voices, desperate, angry, terrified. The Lord's soldiers emerge from the ridge path, some injured, some still brandishing weapons, all stumbling from the fight above. They freeze when they see the exposed machine. Their eyes widen as they realize the villagers have discovered the secret the Lord has been hiding. But before you can process their arrival, another sound echoes across the clearing. Hooves, many of them. The Lord arrives on horseback with a small escort, his armor now dented, cloak torn from the earlier skirmish. But his eyes, sharp, furious, desperate, fix immediately on the ruined machine. He sees the creature tearing at his creation, the chemical pit exposed, the villagers witnessing the heart of his scheme. His expression twists into something feral, not fear, not embarrassment, fury. He raises his hand and shouts, "Kill the beast, protect the mechanism." No one touches it. The soldiers hesitate, not because they fear the creature, but because they fear the instability of the structure, the flood behind them, the masked strangers somewhere above, the chaos of the ridge collapsing. And then the masked figures appear at the tree line, stepping silently into the clearing with their green lanterns held high. The two forces lock eyes, soldiers and masked wanderers, while the creature thrashes in the pit below. The Lord sees them, and his voice breaks with rage. You've meddled for the last time. This entire village is under my authority. You have no right. But he stops, because the masked leader raises his lantern, and the green flame grows brighter, brighter, bright enough to reflect off the strange liquid in the pit, bright enough to illuminate the grooves on the metal blocks, bright enough to reveal symbols you've never seen, but Marta has. Her hand tightens around yours as she whispers, "Those are binding marks." You turn to her, confused. Binding for what? Marta swallows. For whatever he was trying to hold beneath this machine. And then beneath the floorboards the creature has shattered. Something moves. Not the beast, not water. Something else. Something waking. Something the Lord never intended anyone to see. The clearing holds its breath. Soldiers, villagers, masked figures, even the wounded creature, all momentarily frozen as the floor beneath the ruined machine shifts again. The mud-streaked wooden beams tremble, and the ground gives a low, dragging groan, like something buried deep is grinding its way toward the surface. The chemical pit sloshes violently as the creature claws its way back, shaking off the burning liquid. Its yellow eyes are locked onto the darkness below, pupils narrowed into slits of primal recognition. Whatever stirs in the pit is older than the beast, older than the village, perhaps older than the Lord's entire lineage. The strange symbols etched into the metal blocks, those binding marks Marta recognized with such dread, begin to glow faintly as the green lantern light touches them. At first you assume it's a trick of the eerie illumination, but no, the grooves themselves emit a dull, pulse-like shimmer, as if responding to a long-forgotten command. The masked leader steps closer to the mechanism, his lantern raised high. The flame flares, turning almost white at the edges. He tampered with a boundary, the leader says, his voice grim, one not meant to be broken, one the river itself once kept sealed. The Lord, realizing his secrets are unraveling faster than he can control, spurs his horse forward. Mud splashes across his boots as he points a trembling finger at the masked faction. "You will leave this land," he bellows. This structure was built with my authority, my rights, my claim." His voice cracks not from fear, but from desperation. He wanted the machine hidden, protected, worshipped silently by gears and secrecy, but now more than 30 people stand around it, witnessing its exposed heart. The masked leader lowers his lantern just enough to speak, but his tone is colder than the rain-soaked air. Authority built on theft is not authority. You drained the river. You broke the land's spine. You weakened the keeper that once slept beneath it. He points toward the chemical pit, and now it wakes. That is when you hear it clearly. A muffled thud beneath the floor, rhythmic and slow, like the beat of a massive heart. Another thud follows, louder, closer. The creature that tore open the machine jerks backward, ears flattened, emitting a sound between a growl and a whimper. Marta grips your arm so tightly her nails dig through your sleeve. "This is what he was holding," she whispers. "The machine wasn't meant to harness the river. It was built to contain whatever the river suppressed." Soldiers exchange uneasy glances as the machine's metal skeleton rattles with each subterranean tremor. One young soldier backs away, shaking his head. "My lord, you didn't tell us anything was down there." The lord doesn't answer. His face twists with the stubborn denial of someone confronted with the catastrophic consequences of his own hubris. "It is nothing," he snaps. "Just settling earth, flood damage. Ignore it." But the next sound leaves no room for denial. A deep echoing moan rises from beneath the chamber, so low it vibrates the air, rattles your teeth, and sends a shockwave across the clearing. The floodwater ripples outward in concentric circles, leaves shiver on branches, even the masked figures stiffen. The moan is followed by a tearing crack, and the earth at the edge of the pit begins to split. Soldiers stumble backward, villagers cry out, mud and water spew upward from the widening fissure. Then something pushes from below, slowly, inexorably, a massive shape straining against the collapsing walls of the chamber. It glows faintly beneath layers of mud and dark liquid, illuminated by some inner pulse. The creature on the ridge roars and swings at the unseen thing, clawing at the dirt as though trying to force whatever lies beneath back down. But the ground gives way further, swallowing part of the wooden chamber and revealing more of the shape beneath, a curved stone-like surface embossed with the same strange binding symbols as the metal blocks. Except these symbols glow brighter, pulsing in rhythm with the moaning heartbeat. Marta stumbles forward in horror. "It's not stone," she gasps. "It's shell." A soldier mutters a curse and drops his spear. The lord, trembling now, tries to regain control of the moment. "Stand your ground," he orders, though his voice trembles like a loose hinge. "Destroy the intruders, secure the site." But his soldiers are no longer listening. The fissure widens again and a sliver of something massive stirs, something ancient and alive. The creature on top of the pit recoils, losing its balance as the ground beneath its feet shifts. It leaps backward just before the floor collapses entirely, sending a surge of liquid and splintered beams shooting skyward. The masked leader shouts a command in a language you don't understand, and his followers lift their lanterns, the green flames blazing brighter than ever. The lord's horse rears, nearly throwing him off. The beast shrieks, a sound sharp enough to rattle the treetops. You scramble backward, pulling Marta with you as water and debris explode across the clearing. Another piece of the shell emerges, curved, ridged, and glowing faintly like molten amber cooled in the earth for centuries. It heaves upward, cracking more of the soil, exposing a shape so large the machine seems like a child's toy by comparison. Villagers scream, soldiers flee, even the masked figures reposition themselves in sudden alarm. Marta turns to you, eyes wide, voice trembling. He wasn't storing power. He wasn't building a weapon. He was using the river to keep this dormant. She swallows hard, and by starving the river, he woke it. The heartbeat-like thuds grow louder, now unmistakably alive, increasingly rapid. The fissure stretches across half the clearing. The shell shifts again, cracking along one glowing seam, and then something presses from inside. The shell fractures, a beam of searing white light bursts outward. Everyone is thrown back. The masked leader shouts, "Cover your eyes." You obey, squeezing them shut as heat washes over your skin. Another crack splits the clearing. Then a terrible silence falls, a silence so complete you hear only your own heartbeat. You open your eyes slowly. The shell's surface is split open. But what's missing is far worse. Whatever was inside the shell is no longer there. And the clearing is suddenly, impossibly still. Something enormous has awakened. But it's not in the pit anymore. It's above you, on the ridge, breathing, watching, waiting. The clearing feels hollowed out, as if the world itself has paused to draw a single trembling breath. The shell in the pit, cracked wide like an ancient egg, gives off a faint, ghostly glow, but whatever was inside it is gone. Steam rises in thin, twisting spirals from the fissures in the ground. Villagers crouch behind debris, soldiers stagger to their feet, clutching broken spears, and the masked figures stand perfectly still, lanterns raised as though listening to something only they can hear. You turn your gaze toward the ridge above, toward the place where you felt that presence a moment ago, but the shadows there are thick and restless, shifting with the mist. You can't see anything clearly, only an outline, a distortion in the air, the suggestion of something impossibly large perched just beyond the torchlight's reach. for the first time since the night began. Even the creature that burst free of the forest lowers its head and growls, not in anger, but in submission. Whatever stands on that ridge is older, stronger, and infinitely more dangerous than the beast. A cold whisper of wind sweeps down the hillside, carrying with it a faint, pulsing hum, so deep it vibrates your bones. Marta grabs your arm, her breath hitching as she stares at the ridge with wide, unblinking eyes. "No," she whispers, "not awake, not fully." You feel a tremor run through her. It wasn't meant to emerge. The bindings weren't meant to break. You try to ask her what she knows, what she recognized in the symbols, in the strange shell, but the words choke in your throat. The presence on the ridge shifts again, brushing aside branches with a soft rustle that sounds almost delicate, despite its sheer size. A soldier nearest the ridge calls out, voice trembling, "Who's there?" But his question feels absurd. Whatever stands there is not someone. It is something. His torch flickers violently, sputters, and then extinguishes entirely, as if the flame itself recoiled in fear. Several other torches flicker too, bending as if drawn toward the ridge by an unseen pull. The masked leader steps forward, raising his lantern high. The green fire swells, violent, bright, almost explosive, and you hear a sharp intake of breath ripple through his followers. One of them murmurs, "It's responding," in a tone of horrified awe. Responding? To the creature? To the machine? Or to them? Before anyone can move, the ridge figure exhales. It is not a roar, not a growl, not anything animal you've ever heard. It is a long, resonant breath that rolls down the mountainside, like the sigh of the earth itself. The trees sway, the remaining torches bend low, almost extinguishing. Your knees wobble beneath you. The masked leader braces himself, and shouts something in that foreign tongue again. Harsh, clipped, commanding. But whatever stands above does not obey. Instead, it shifts its weight, causing stones to tumble down the slope. The Lord, caked in mud and wild-eyed with humiliation, seizes the moment to reassert himself. He points his sword at the ridge and screams, "Kill it, kill all of them, protect what's mine." But the command only reveals how broken his authority has become. None of his soldiers move, some back away, shaking their heads. Others stare at him with disbelief, finally seeing the disaster he has wrought. He screams again, but his voice cracks, splintering like the machine he tried so desperately to hide. The masked figures remain calm, but their formation is no longer rigid. It is defensive. Their lanterns flicker wildly, as though fighting to maintain their glow. One of them steps closer to the leader, and whispers something urgent. You can't hear the words, but you see the shift in the leader's posture, his head tilting, his shoulders sinking slightly in resignation. He lowers the lantern, and the group takes a slow step back. Marta notices immediately. "They're preparing to retreat," she murmurs. "They know they can't face it alone." The Lord sees this too, and desperation flares in him like fire catching dry straw. "Cowards," he howls. "You bring this thing here and now you run. You will not leave, not until you fix what you've unleashed." He charges forward on his horse, sword raised high, aiming directly for the masked leader. But the creature on the ridge emits a low vibration that ripples down the slope. The horse rears violently, throwing the Lord into the mud with a heavy thud. His sword skitters across the ground, disappearing into the cracked earth beside the pit. The vibration intensifies. You can feel it in your ribs, in your teeth, in your bones. The masked leader shouts one final warning, this time in your language. Do not look at its face. His voice is sharp, urgent. You freeze. The villagers freeze. Even the beast crouched near the pit lowers its gaze. A faint pale glow begins to form on the ridge. Soft at first, like moonlight breaking through fog. Then brighter and brighter. The shadowed outline of the creature becomes clearer now. Massive shoulders, ridged back, limbs too long for any natural shape. A head crowned with branching horn-like shapes that pulse with the same glow, radiating from the broken shell below. The glow builds, it shifts, it moves, and then it begins descending the ridge. Each step is slow, deliberate, impossibly heavy. The ground trembles with every movement. Rocks fracture, trees bow away from its presence. Soldiers drop their torches and run. Villagers collapse to their knees in terror. The masked figures brace themselves, Lanterns raised, chanting in low, unified tones. Marta clutches your arm so tightly you fear she might never let go. Then the creature stops, not at the pit, not at the soldiers, not at the masked travelers. It stops directly above the cracked shell, and turns its head toward you. The glow intensifies, blinding white, filling your vision, burning the shapes of trees and faces and lanterns into shimmering after images. Something is unfolding behind its eyes. Not malice, not hunger, recognition, as if it knows you, as if it has been waiting for you. The world tilts, the wind shifts, the masked leader shouts your name, and then as the creature opens its mouth and the white light surges toward you, everything goes silent, not with peace, but with the terrible stillness that comes just before something impossible happens. And slowly now, like a lantern dimming at the end of a long winding night, the sound of the world begins to soften again. The storm's memory fades to a distant hush. The trembling earth stills beneath your feet, settling into the cool, damp soil. That unbearable brightness, that impossible presence on the ridge, dissolves into a calm, stretching darkness. You feel yourself breathe again, slow, gentle, steady, letting your body unwind from the chaos of the night. You take a step back from everything, the shattered machine, the rushing water, the frightened soldiers, the masked wanderers, and the villagers gathering their courage. You can almost imagine yourself standing beyond it all, far from danger, far from the noise, just you, and the quiet, and the warm promise of rest stretching out in front of you, like a safe little path, lit by soft candlelight. The air cools as you move away, the forest settling into its natural rhythm once more. Even Marta's voice becomes calm again, no longer urgent or afraid, just thoughtful and gentle, fading into the background like a friend whispering that the worst has passed. The heavy presence on the ridge becomes distant, still there in the story, yes, but softened by space and time, as if you've walked far enough away that it can no longer reach you. Everything slows, everything loosens, everything breathes. You follow the faint shape of a small dirt path, one that feels familiar and safe, leading you back toward the edge of the village. The cottages, even battered, glow softly with the warm colors of hearthlight. Windows flicker gently in the darkness, and chimneys release thin trails of smoke curling upward like sleepy sighs. The stormwater trickles through the guttering in quiet streams, no longer raging, just moving, steady and peaceful. Whatever chaos the night brought, it's behind you now. What remains is the steady companionship of a place settling down, of a world remembering how to be quiet again. As you walk, household doors close, softly, shutters rest against their frames, and you can hear the low hum of voices as families check on one another before settling into much-needed sleep. A dog gives a single half-hearted bark before curling up under a dry awning. A lantern swings gently in the breeze near a doorway, casting a soft buttery glow across the muddy path. Every detail feels slow and warm and safe, inviting you to breathe deeply and let the last bits of tension fall from your shoulders. Finally, you reach your cottage, still standing, still warm, still waiting. You push open the door and step inside. The familiar scent of smoke and wool blankets welcomes you. The hearth flickers low, its embers glowing like tiny stars. You wrap yourself in your blanket, still carrying the scent of the day's journey, and settle onto your straw mattress. The blanket feels heavier tonight, in a comforting way, grounding you, reminding you that you've made it through everything the night had to offer. Outside, the wind softens to a slow, steady whisper against the thatch roof. Somewhere in the distance, a single owl calls, a long, low note that drifts across the quiet fields. You let your breathing follow that same gentle rhythm, long and slow, like waves rolling softly onto a shore. Your eyelids grow heavy, your muscles loosen, your mind feels warm and quiet. The night holds you in its steady embrace, and the entire world feels wrapped in the hush of safety that comes after chaos. And as you settle deeper beneath your blanket, letting the final threads of wakefulness slip gently away, I want to thank you for spending this time here tonight, for choosing calm, choosing rest, choosing a little candlelit journey through the strange corners of history. It's always an honor to have you here, sharing these quiet nighttime wanderings with me. If you enjoyed this long, cozy journey, if it helped you unwind or drift off, feel free to like the video or subscribe so you don't miss the next Candlelit History story. We do these every week, Long, slow, calming adventures through history's oddities, mysteries, and everyday lives. And I'd genuinely love to hear from you, where in the world you're listening from, or what time it is where you are right now, or even whether you made it all the way to the end before drifting into sleep. Your comments always make this space feel like a warm little community, stretching across time zones and quiet rooms all over the world. But for now, rest, settle in, let the last flicker of candlelight guide you gently into sleep. The screen will fade to black soon, and the soft sounds of crackling will take over as you drift. Thank you truly for being here. Sleep well, friend. Good night. From Candlelit History.